Diving right back into it, I was on a podcast last night with my next guest. Um, Had a good time as always. Tim Young's podcast. Tim runs his mouth. Yes, yes, he does. I can assure you. Sarah Parshall Perry joining me now, defending education's vice president. Sarah, nice to have you back on the program.
Steve, always great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Steve runs his mouth too, by the way. Let's see. I've got so much to go through here. I'm going to start with this. We talked about this last night on the podcast. There are only two conservatives on this court, in my estimation, Thomas and Alito. That's it. I mean, the others are always suspect on any given. Of course, you got three that are certainly lefties, but only two conservative. People say it's a 6-3 conservative court. I don't believe that, and I don't believe that when I see cases like Liam Morrison. He's the kid that wore there are only two genders to a school in Massachusetts, refused to change his shirt. They tossed him out. Then he came back and said there are only, and then it was censored on his shirt, and they threw him out of school for that because he refused to change his shirt. I mean, and the Supreme Court, Samuel Alito called them cowards, wouldn't change it, right? What do you make of this?
Well, there's a lot that goes into a decision to grant cert in a case, right? So generally, you need four justices to be able to sign on to a case that they think is right for consideration. Whether or not that involves sort of a controversial social or cultural issue sometimes plays into the factor as well. And that's kind of what Justice Alito said here. Now, this case with Liam Morrison, this is an Alliance Defending Freedom case, and this case originates out of Massachusetts. It was a case called LM versus Middleborough. And when this young man was a middle school child, he was indeed tossed out of school for wearing a shirt that communicated a simple message that he believed there were only two genders. By the way, also a scientifically accurate belief, regardless of whether or not you're told about gender being on a spectrum. But he was
Yeah.
actually sent home. Now, this, to my mind, is one of the worst travesties of a free speech principle we've ever seen in operation within a public school format. This is a young man who was doing nothing to disrupt anything around him, any of his classmates around him. There was no factual evidence in the record itself indicating that he had disrupted school. And of course, the Supreme Court said, listen, you can sort of stifle speech if it's going to be disruptive to the school day. Obviously, the public school paradigm works when we have order and discipline within public schools. But there was nothing in the factual record to indicate that.
So what
Just
would
quiet
happen?
communication.
Yeah, what would happen if he wore a shirt that said, I don't know, Jesus is Lord? Would that be disruptive? A Christian message? Would that be unacceptable in this school in Massachusetts? And why would the Supreme Court not stand up and say, hey, of course he can have a shirt that says that? It's first grade science, biological dimorphism. But seriously, what else is restricted? Jesus is Lord, anything that's Christian, what?
Well, you're exactly right, Steve. There's no self-limiting principle here, right? When we communicate messages and we speak within our own personal capacity, and the Supreme Court's held over and over again that public school students do not relinquish their free speech rights at the schoolhouse door. They are allowed to communicate as well. They are still private citizens, and whether or not that communication is disruptive is really the only factor that they are allowed to take into consideration, because in all other aspects, children enjoy the same First Amendment freedoms that adults do. But you're right. If you can censor a child for wearing a shirt that says simply there are only two genders, and then there are only two censored genders, not once but twice this young man was sent home, what other messages cannot be communicated? Now, in some contexts, the Supreme Court said, okay, gang insignias, we don't want to allow to be populated within public schools. Why? Again, that's disruptive. We don't want emblems of violence, also disruptive. But a simple message communicated simply by wearing a t-shirt, an unspoken communication of what that individual believes, really, I think, boggles the mind. And Justice Alito was joined by Justice Thomas in this dissent from denial of cert in this particular case, really disappointed in the court and said this is an issue of growing national importance. Children
Yeah,
do not relinquish their speech rights at the schoolhouse door. We're going to have to deal with these complicated cultural issues.
but they didn't. Of course. Hey, something else here, and this takes me back to Barack Obama when he basically put all student loans into the government's hands, which never should have happened. But to me, maybe I'm jaded here, Sarah, but my opinion was then and it is now that created cash flow for the United States of America. You got millions and millions of people making monthly payments, creates a cash flow. Uh, the big corporations on Wall Street would love this. But now, because for the first time in 5 years, give or take, these kids have to pay their loan and keep the cash coming to the United States government. A lot of defaults, delinquencies are surging. I mean, no shock here, right? It went from 0.7% in the fourth quarter to 8% in the first quarter of this year. So it's up many times over. No surprise, is it?
Not at all. And this is what happens when you hide defaults and delinquencies onto millions of students' student loan debts. First of all, the student loan sort of industrial complex has been in need of reform for a really long time. We understand that college is too expensive, and we also understand that the government is giving us money to pay for college at too expensive a rate. This is going to be a problem that's only going to get worse unless someone stands in the gap and says, we've got to reform the entire higher education paradigm, how much it costs, what the degrees are actually worth, and how we're getting kids to pay for them.
Ah,
well, now,
you nailed
of course,
it. You nailed
because
it. What
of course,
are they worth?
how
Which
far
brings in my solution. My
no more
solution
gender
for this
studies
problem
degrees.
is you make these universities and colleges co-signers on that loan. If 5 years down the line or whatever period of time down the line, they have not produced the income as promised, they sold the student that bill of goods, they should be the co-signers on that loan. I mean, Harvard's got what, 60, 80 billion dollars in endowment? They all have endowments. Back up your piece of paper, guarantee it. Of course, they would freak out, wouldn't they?
That's
I'll give
exactly
you the last
it.
word.
No, and now we've got millions that are being flooded into payments of student loan debt that are leaving the economy. So naturally, there's going to be a rebound effect, but we are talking billions of dollars now in default. It is unconscionable. This is what we had from the Biden administration. Just yesterday, Secretary McMahon at Department of Education said, in case you guys are wondering, you've got to pay back all your loans.
Yeah, if you're wondering, you signed it, but people pay their loans a minimum amount year after year after year. The principal never goes down. They've created a system that it's unworkable. Anyhow, Sarah Parshall Perry, we'll talk about that next time. Defending Education's Vice President. Sarah, always nice to see you.
You as well, Steve. Thanks again.